Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da da 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 ba ba.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month, we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. This episode, we're traveling the Wanderer's Road with Miyamoto Usagi and Tomoe Ame from Usagi Yojimbo by Stan Sakai. And we're applying Let the Samurai Be Your Guide by Tsugawa Whaley to their relationship woes.
Well, listeners, I hope you appreciate our voices because it took a long, arduous journey to get to these microphones today.
There is more than one road to the top of the mountain, and I think we took maybe all of them to get here today.
Yeah. Normally, we like to record around, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., but we are approaching 7 o'clock here on the East Coast, and I'm not feeling it.
We've had one of those days where we have just been getting on each other's last nerves.
Yeah.
Getting on our own last nerves.
Yeah. The way it happened was we were finishing up our notes for this episode, and I got done before Lisa did.
As per usual.
And we were working in two separate rooms. I was in our office. Lisa was in our living room. I got done. I grabbed a copy of Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil and then flopped myself on the couch right behind Lisa. And Lisa got a little annoyed.
It was like he was reading Daredevil at me.
Like as if I was saying, hurry up and get done.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm just going to have a ton of fun until you do.
Like, it was like, you get your notes done while I have a Saturday. Yeah. And then I just started running this narrative through my mind of, well, as soon as I'm done with my notes, it's going to be, eat lunchtime, then, record for 9.5 hours, then fall asleep watching a movie, and then your Saturday is over and you had zero fun, was like the story I was telling myself. And I got a little peevy in your general direction.
Well, so it led into a heated, hot emotion conversation about note-taking. And I said things like, well, maybe you need to, readjust how arduous you make your note-taking process.
And I was like, well, maybe you shouldn't be relaxing right in front of me.
Yeah.
And you have an office in which you work, and I don't have an office.
And then that became a conversation about clutter. And, there's no space in this apartment and how we need to get it home. And then we had to go take a long walk to blow the stink off. But in the process of taking that long walk,
I felt a lot better. But in making myself feel better, I made Brad feel terrible about himself.
And so we got back from that walk. And
I was like, let's record.
I'm really frustrated. That turned into another conversation. And then, I start cleaning the kitchen. Lisa starts cleaning the bathroom. We're in our separate apartments.
Yeah. I mean, when we were discussing how we want, we leave a space in our notes where we just put banter. And when we're having a day like this, we look at each other and it's like, what do we have in our hearts to really banter about?
It's the end of the year. The holidays are coming. No thanks.
No thanks. We don't even have room for a Christmas tree in this apartment. We seriously had that conversation. Which I started, and for which I still apologize.
I like the idea about getting a garland, though.
Yeah, you didn't act enthusiastic enough as soon as I suggested
I'm telling
it.
you now, I'm enthusiastic about it.
The weird thing is, there are some Saturdays where I get up in the morning and I leisurely listen to the news, and then I finish up my notes while you read a comic book, and then we have lunch, and then we sit down and we start recording, and that's exactly what I want to do.
Right.
And then I have that day, and I go amazing Saturday. I was productive. I had fun. Killed it. But there was just something about, the old saying, I got up on the wrong side of the bed.
Yeah,
it was one of those things where I just had like, I just had an emotion in me. And I just started throwing rage darts at that emotion and just started hitting all kinds of stuff that was just like, I just had a feel.
And you were doing, and I was doing the thing that we talk about all the time, building a narrative without actually talking that narrative out with your partner. And so, like, I honestly think because of this podcast, we've been doing it for 2 years now. We just had our second anniversary on December 1st.
High fives to each other, but also to our listeners. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. But like, because we've been doing this, I really honestly think that it gives us the tools to observe these moments from above and shape them into what we actually want them to be. So, yes, we wanted to record this podcast probably like 5 hours ago, but we got sidetracked with this argument, this frustration. We worked that out, and we're back at the table.
It's so funny that that's the way that you put this, because there was a point in today where when I was wiping all of the intentions I had written on dry erase marker off of the mirror, and I was like, what is the point of all of this self-help we've been doing over the past 2 years and all of these relationship conversations if we are just going to always be having the conversation where Lisa has to get all of her emotions out and Brad is going to brood? Like, when are we just going to either stop doing that or accept that that's a thing? You know what I mean?
I don't know. Like, I think you're always going to have an argument. Relationships are going to be peppered with arguments. It's how you deal with them and how long they infect you. And I feel like the infection process these arguments have in our life have decreased over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think that that's true. And then also, I think that it also gives us a vocabulary to laugh at ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
and it gives us an excuse to talk about it here in this banter portion.
Oh my goodness. It's like everything becomes content.
Yeah, everything's content. Always be podcasting. But I also think that it's no coincidence that this argument happened on our last episode of Usagi Yojimbo. We just don't want to say goodbye to Miyamoto and Tomoe.
Our arguments are like their duels. They always end in a draw and us laughing and having lunch.
Or more likely, some of those delicious cookies you made yesterday.
Yeah, I did make cookies yesterday. I'm an amazing wife.
Yeah, you are. Lisa, I got to ask you a question here. So,
Sure.
We've now covered Grasscutter, the Mother of Mountains, and Tomoe's story. Are you heavily invested in the unrequited romance between Miyamoto Usagi and Tomoe Ame?
100%.
Yes.
And you know that from
I do.
talking about Chinoyu. That issue profoundly moved me, and it was tense and soulful and sexy, and it would have meant nothing to me if I thought that either of them had another road they could take in their lives to get that kind of romantic fulfillment they both seem to be longing for but can't have because of their commitments to their lords.
Yeah, and if you go back to our first episode on Grasscutter, I was really nervous to introduce this comic to you because I clearly adore Stan Sakai's work. And I was so thrilled to see that you engaged with it strongly, especially when we got to Mother of Mountains. And so, are you interested in exploring more Usagi Yojimbo comics?
Absolutely. But I do like that they've been curated for me. You've only been giving me the most fun, most exciting and accessible issues. And I know that a lot of Usagi Yojimbo is just that bunny rabbit wandering around, doing a whole lot of nothing.
And I mean, I don't know if I would say a whole lot of nothing, but I think curation's important, especially when tackling a work that is so epic. I mean, there's been decades on decades of content here. But I've got stuff loaded in the chamber for you when this episode is over. We're going to continue on with some stories.
I like the idea of returning to Usagi Yojimbo from another angle of either Usagi's relationship with another woman, of which I've been told there have been those kinds of things, or his relationship with himself, or I barely know anything about his relationship with Mifune, the lord that passed away, whose mon he is still wearing.
Yeah. And what a massive specter he is in Usagi's life, right? And that hasn't really been explored in the 4 stories that we've covered.
So I feel like we could dip into this storyline from many different angles and get many, to me, all Usagi Yojimbo is about is Tomoe Ame and
Right.
Miyamoto Usagi being together and not being together.
Yeah, we got to get you some more Jotaro comics. That's what I'm going to tell you right now. Because like the character of Jotaro clearly features heavily in this story we're about to talk about, Senso. But my other question for you is, now having some strong opinions about Stan Sakai and Usagi Yojimbo, do you consider Senso a Usagi Yojimbo comic?
Yes, I do consider it a Usagi Yojimbo comic. Now,
Do you consider it canon?
No, I do not. And I had read ahead and I saw that you had this question in there because as I was reading the comic, I was flipping it in the air with disgust, saying, this comic is not canon to me. Even before I had read the end of the comic, which does essentially say that this is just a story, a legend, and not canon.
I wish we could invite our listeners into our apartment while you were reading Senso, because you were so disgusted with it, especially those early issues.
I think Stan Sakai kind of set me up for that reaction in the introduction to this story. Because what he did was super cute. He did this thing where he had a cartoon of himself talking to Usagi, and Usagi going like, you've been doing all of this other like 47 Ronin stuff. When are we going to get back to Usagi stories? And Stan Sakai going like, I'm looking to do something a little different.
Yeah, like the way Sakai writes the Usagi character in that moment is he's like taking on the voice of Usagi fandom. Like, hey, Stan, aren't you sick and tired of drawing human characters with 5 fingers? Referring to the 47 Ronin storyline that he did with Mike Richardson. Isn't it more fun and a whole lot easier to draw animal characters with 4 fingers? So he knows that the fandom, when they start to read Senso, are going to buck against it a little bit, like you clearly did.
I think it was a little defensive to him to do that. Like, I don't like when creators try to anticipate some kind of negative reaction.
Yeah, I agree with you.
In a lot of cases, I don't think that results in the best art.
Yeah.
Though I do enjoy Senso a lot. It did, like, when I got into what Senso was, I immediately was able to dismiss it in my mind of, oh, well, this is just Stan Sakai having fun. This isn't like canon. This is more like a flight of fancy. And that's why, Jai comes back and is taken care of in a panel. Like, that's not satisfying to somebody who has been on this journey.
It's so invested, right? Like, so Senso came out in 2014, the year Usagi Yojimbo hit its 30th anniversary, and right after Stan Sakai completed 47th Ronin with Mike Richardson. And that adaptation was incredibly important to Sakai. It's something that we've talked about here on the podcast, but that story is that is mythology in Japan. Like, it is an incredibly important tale, and many, many, many artists have interpreted it in numerous mediums. Sakai did not want to mess it up in any way. And as you can gather from that Stan and Usagi intro to Senso, he sensed that the fandom was getting a little antsy. Like, I'm sure they all appreciate it, but like, let's get back to more Usagi comics. And the Usagi comic that they come back to is such a flight of fancy. It's this massive time jump. It's 15 to 20 years in the future, depending on what edition of the hardcover you have or what Stan Sakai interview you're reading. And then we got H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds invading feudal Japan. And like, we expect some fantasy here and there with Usagi Yojimbo. We don't expect necessarily science fiction to happen. And so when you read this intro, the Usagi and Stan cartoon, he's, like you said, being a little defensive, and he says to Usagi, don't worry, it will be terrific and exciting, some of the best art I've ever done. And I do think he's true on that last part. Like, I think it is some of Sakai's best art.
I do agree with that. It's gorgeous. And the designs are so fun. Like, it's signature Sakai. How can something so gory, so weird, so scary be so darn cute?
I mean, Senso was a story that percolated inside Sakai's head for over a decade before he ever put it down to paper. He just couldn't shake this image of Usagi leading the charge of armored samurai into battle against the tripods. But to your point, Lisa, Sakai himself doesn't consider Senso canon. He will only go as far as to say that it's one of many possibilities. The comic really does operate like something akin to Marvel's Old Man Logan or Thanos The End. When you read those stories, you don't go like, well, this is the definitive climax to Wolverine's life. It's just a glimpse of what one writer thinks that life might go. And for Sakai, this is him considering what could Usagi's end be like. Because Sakai owns Usagi in total, whenever he wants to have a little fun, he can drift into one of these fantasies. And he's talked about telling tales of Usagi's descendants. Western stories, film noir stories, pulp hero stories. Shadow of the Rabbit is a title that he has thrown around. But I gotta say, I'm with you, Lisa. I have fun with Senso, but by its very nature and Sakai's admission, it feels like a dream or something you toss aside and then you dig back into the proper main continuity.
It's like Stan Sakai is writing his own really good quality fan fiction. And like the fan fiction I love, it's also tentacle porn. That's not true. I don't watch or enjoy tentacle porn. I haven't tried it. I might like it. I don't know.
But clearly Sakai likes these Martians, these octopi.
They're adorable.
It's tentacle porn. I'll give you that, Lisa. And the way that I read Senso at the end of the day is it's more space Usagi than it ever was Usagi Yojimbo.
Brad, I know you've just been dying to tell me about Space Usagi, so lay it on me.
I really have. This sci-fi space opera spin on Usagi Yojimbo was born out of Sakai's desire to draw dinosaurs alongside Miyamoto Usagi. By jumping the story into the far, far future of Miyamoto's descendants, Sakai could basically draw whatever he wanted, whereas the main Usagi Yojimbo storyline is grounded at least to the history and culture of feudal Japan. Although Space Usagi is grounded in a lot of ways as well, the culture of feudal Japan continues in some form or another in this future. But it's a wild fantasy world. If you think Senso takes liberties with Usagi Yojimbo's ideas, Lisa, then you should really prepare yourself for Space Usagi.
I feel like I've been doing that by watching The Mandalorian.
Yeah, I mean, it is Star Wars. Space Usagi is Star Wars without any pretense of hiding the Kurosawa influences, right? The idea for Space Usagi has its origins within the 1989 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toy line from Playmates. The first Usagi action figure sold so well that when they went back to Sakai and asked him if he had any other ideas for a character, he just blurted out Space Usagi. The timing seemed perfect. The animated adventures of Bucky O'Hare were about to hit the small screen, and Playmates gave the green light on the figure, which finally hit toy shelves in 1991. Turns out, though, Lisa, Bucky O'Hare was not the success they were hoping for, and its failure caused the planned Space Usagi animated series to never reach beyond a 3.5-minute presentation video.
I've literally never heard of Bucky O'Hare.
Yeah, well, there you go. So if Bucky O'Hare stinks, then Space Usagi must not have worked, right? That was the logic. Sad for us. On the comic front, though, Mirage Studios was doing gangbusters. They're the home of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's Ninja Turtles, and they agreed to publish a Space Usagi miniseries. The first one came out in 1992, and there were 2 more Space Usagi miniseries that followed, with the last one being published by Dark Horse Comics after Mirage folded. In fact, when Mirage published the last issue of Usagi Yojimbo, the third Space Usagi miniseries was the first Usagi comic published by Dark Horse Comics in 1996. And all of that Space Usagi stuff, Lisa, can be found in the Dark Horse Comics Legends collections of the Usagi Yojimbo saga. Love that book. I love that book. But it is, yes, it's all slightly out of canon, flights of fantasy, all that stuff. But it's really good. And what you realize when you get to the very end of Senso is that it's not actually a story tied to Usagi Yojimbo, but to Space Usagi. It's a tale within a tale, and something I should have been more hip to when I first read Senso in singles, because the very first caption begins with a pair of quotation marks.
Duh!
Everything within is a fiction. This is not how Jay meets his end. This is not how Usagi meets his end. This is not how Lord Hikichi meets his end. It's a fantasy. But is it BS, Lisa?
Yes!
No, it's not BS. Because, like, the greatest gift that Senso gives to us is its validation of the relationship between Miyamoto Usagi and Tomoe Ame. Stan Sakai is saying this romance is the one true pairing of the series by making it, quote unquote, the final Usagi Yojimbo story, with their relationship at the center of it. I think that's super significant. I also think that it's really important that Sakai is basically underscoring the big stories of the entire series by wrapping them up here. Usagi and Jotaro, Lord Hikichi, Motokazu the Samurai, Jason. Because of the nature of this comic, with its endless path of the wandering samurai, Sakai may never put a bow on these stories, but he can at least imagine the bow through the lens of Senso. That's why this comic book is important. It's why it's significant. It's why we read it.
I actually agree.
Yeah.
I was not agreeing for ha-has and continuing the conversation. But while I don't consider the circumstances of this story canon, I don't think this is the end for Miyamoto Usagi or Tomoe Ame. I do think that we learn something about the characters by the decisions that they make in these circumstances. Like, yeah, Usagi is being super cool about the path that they cannot take as a couple at the end of Chinoyu, but how is he going to feel 15 to 20 years down the line? He is getting impatient and bitter.
Yeah.
Like, he's always hemming and hawing. When am I going to get around to telling Jotaro I'm his dad? Like, now we see those circumstances. He has to literally be dying to finally tell Jotaro. So the history is not canon. The characters, they're 100% truth in this world to me.
At the same time, having now read Senso and seeing that these truths between father and son and Miyamoto and Tomoe don't come out until the very end, as a reader you go, I really hope that the main timeline addresses these issues before this moment.
But do we really? Because it's these burning questions that keeps us coming back to issue after issue after issue. Like, when he's like, okay, Jotaro, I'm your dad. Tomoe, is it going to work out between us? Nah, I'll move on. Like, why would we keep reading Usagi Yojimbo?
Because there's other stories to be told beyond those moments. Having read Senso, yes, I do want Jotaro and Usagi to know each other as father and son before their deathbeds, or before Usagi's deathbed.
Stan Sakai is a master tantric storyteller.
Yes.
He knows what we want. He's not going to give it to us.
But I think what we see in Senso is the logical conclusion of where these stories were going from the point in 2014. And I think he works out the logical direction in Senso so that he can come up with some more surprising directions in the main title.
You've been on this journey with Usagi and Tomoe way longer than I have. So I understand if you are like ready to climax with that.
I mean, yeah, that's true. That's true. But like, while this episode is our last one with this couple, it's also our last one with our love guru. So Lisa, we got to dig into Lori Tsugawa Whaley's Let the Samurai Be Your Guide for one last time. How are we using her book this week?
Our love guru is Lori Tsugawa Whaley and her book, Let the Samurai Be Your Guide, The Seven Bushido Pathways to Personal Success. She is a third-generation Japanese-American and a descendant of the samurai warriors on her paternal side. She is now a life coach and keynote speaker who teaches the principles of her interpretation of the Bushido Code to help people tap into what she refers to as their soul purpose, find their true leadership potential, and live powerful lives. For this last episode, I'd like to reflect primarily on Chapter 6, which is the chapter on honor. The idea of honor, at least in my mind, is inextricably linked to the idea of the samurai. It is something that samurai like Usagi and Tomoe hold in high regard, and when it comes to living a life of dishonor, or not living at all, the expectation is that the samurai would prefer the latter. But what is honor? Lori Tsugawa Whaley equates the English word honor to the Japanese word mayo or mayo. Get ready for me to mispronounce things.
Why should anything change now?
The kanji for mayo is comprised of two parts. Mai, meaning reputation, and yo, meaning admirable or praiseworthy. So the literal translation would be having a praiseworthy reputation. Tsugawa Whaley has devoted a chapter to honor on equal stead with her other Bushido principles: courage, integrity, benevolence, respect, honesty, and loyalty. But the chapter reads like honor is the public face of the amalgamation of these other principles. If you are known to be a person who adheres to the principles of the Bushido Code, you are a person of honor. If you are known to be a person who disregards the principles of the Bushido Code, you are a person of dishonor. When comparing this chapter on honor to the chapter we covered last episode on integrity, they initially seemed very similar. They both depend on you sticking to your principles, sticking to your commitments, and sticking to the truth. To me, there seem to be two main differences. Firstly, integrity has a public face, how others perceive it, and a private face, how you perceive yourself. Someone can slander you and ruin your reputation with lies, but you can still consider yourself a person of integrity. Honor only has a public face. So if someone slanders you and ruins your reputation, you cannot consider yourself a person of honor. The second difference between integrity and honor is that integrity is only a reflection of you as an individual, where your honor extends to others you represent, such as your family, your community, your nation, or if you are a samurai, your feudal lord. When you lose your integrity, you bring shame to yourself. When you lose your honor, you bring shame to yourself and everyone you represent. This makes honor a high-stakes endeavor, hence samurai choosing death over dishonor. That is not to say that honor does not exist in American culture, though I do think that it applies to some groups more than others. I was listening to an interview with Ijoma Oluo on the Politically Reactive podcast hosted by comedians W. Kamau Bell and Hari Kondabolu. She's the author of the book So You Want to Talk About Race. They bonded over how, as minorities and children of immigrants, in the case of Ijoma and Hari, they are often looked at as representatives of their entire race, nationality, or religion. Tsugawa Whaley also talks about this phenomenon about being a Japanese-American child growing up soon after World War II. As a straight, white, gender-normative person, I don't feel like I shoulder that same burden. Like, nobody's looking at me as a representative of any particular group. And sometimes I feel like I take that for granted.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we're always trying to check our privilege. It's something you have to be proactive about.
And you're going to fail at it all of the time.
Sure.
I do think the life of the individual in American culture is valued over the honor of the individual. We love a story about a person going against the wishes of their parents and risking it all to achieve against the odds the American dream, whatever that may be. I think that our cultural fascination with that story is one of the gross reasons we keep the American dream unattainable to so many. Pursue happiness all you want doesn't mean we're going to make it widely available. But I digress. According to Tsugawa Whaley, there are distinct advantages to living in a community that considers honor a high-stakes endeavor. In her chapter on honesty, she cited a comparative study conducted in 2003 by Professor Mark West of the University of Michigan of American and Japanese honesty. 20 wallets with the equivalent of $20 were left on the streets of New York and the streets of Tokyo. In New York, 6 of the wallets were returned and 2 of them had no cash.
Yeah, I mean, that's better than I thought.
In Tokyo, 17 of the wallets were returned.
Sure.
All of them had the cash, and only one person accepted the cash as a reward for turning the wallet in. That is a pretty small representative study, but personally, I would be way more worried about losing my wallet on the streets of New York than the streets of Tokyo. In 2011, 5 months after the earthquake and tsunami devastated Japan, officials reported more than 5,700 safes and wallets were turned in.
Wow.
Japan's National Police Agency reported that over $78 million of valuables, including antiques, gold, cash, and other valuables, were restored to their rightful owners after people anonymously turning them in.
Amazing.
When honor is high stakes, trust becomes more of the default than suspicion. According to Tsugawa Whaley, even today in Japan, spoken agreements are as legally binding as written agreements. And there's not the American compulsion to get things in writing with a witness and a notary. I think that in 2020 America, we have been witnessing firsthand people gaining power through the sowing of American distrust.
Yup.
Just look at where we are in terms of the pandemic. People are literally dying because we are so conflicted about who and what to believe.
Yep.
For her example of honor, Tsugawa Whaley points to Saigo Takamori, who is considered to be the last samurai. Side note, Tom Cruise is not considered the last samurai.
What?
He lived during the Meiji Restoration period, Saigo Takamori, not Tom Cruise, which was a time of great turmoil in Japan, as the isolated feudal society ended and made way for the modernized, industrialized, westernized nation-state of Japan. Takamori was born a samurai in 1828, having the lineage on both sides. But over the course of his career, he observed the Tokugawa shogunate gradually yield to Western pressures, ending the long period of sakogu, isolationist foreign policy, and diminished the role of the samurai. In 1876, the government banned carrying swords for everyone except soldiers, police, and officers at state ceremonies, which was a major insult to samurai who considered their swords an extension of themselves.
Yeah, their soul.
And later that year, the samurai stipend was reduced by 30%. Publicly and politically, Takamori sided with the imperialists who sought to restore the emperor and preserve the elite status of the samurai, but modernization was rapidly eroding their way of life. The new central government, fearing a rebellion, sent warships to the Kagoshima prefecture, which had become the home base of Takamori and other former officers and soldiers of the Imperial Guard, to remove the weapons from the government arsenal. Protesters approached Takamori to lead the rebels against the government. These rebels numbered around 40,000 troops, but the government army was 300,000 troops. Not to mention they were fighting with swords and arrows, not unlike what we see in Usagi Yojimbo, while the government was using modern weapons. Despite being doomed to fail, Takamori and his rebels fought to their last man. Lori Tsugawa Whaley holds this man up as a hero, but it's hard for me personally to wrap my head around that.
Sure.
For me, it just feels like a lot of senseless death. But does that mean collective honor is not worth fighting for if you know you're doomed to fail? I don't know. It boggles my mind. I am willing to say that this is a huge cultural blind spot for me. But that is what stories are all about. Putting ourselves in another point of view and risking boggling our minds in hopes that we get a little more open, savvy, and empathetic. I think there's a lot to talk about when it comes to honor in the pages of Senso, as well as the role that legacy and storytelling has when it comes to the preservation of principles from one generation to the next.
Yeah, I think there definitely is. But before we can do that, Lisa, we got to get to words of affirmation.
Affirmation. fans.
This is the portion of the show where we get to highlight you lovely listeners, those that took the time out of their day to either sign up for our Patreon community or write us a rad review. And guess what? We've got ourselves a rad review right here. A 5-star review from HTS_Jaws.
Thank you so
J-O-Z.
Thank you so much, HTS_Jaws.
Lisa, do you want to read that for us?
I would love to. Had a blast listening to these guys go back and forth. Their banter is great. Oh, thank you. And they have a blast doing what they do, which is conveyed through the very essence of the show. If I could give more than 5 stars, I absolutely would. That's so sweet. We would take more than 5 stars if we could.
I mean, you can give us more than 5 stars. You can sign up for our Patreon community. We have bonus content there. We just recorded a new Married to Singles episode where we dive in depth into Batman Catwoman #1 from Tom King and Clay Mann and work out some complicated feelings about how Tom King spreads 3 timelines over the course of that book. Ultimately, I came down with, I like that comic.
Me too.
It was a process, and I didn't get to my feelings until we had that entire conversation yesterday.
You'll also have access to our back catalog of bonus episodes where we just did our holiday gift guide. I think that one was great.
It's my favorite Patreon episode.
So far, we love to shop. And you'll also get to hear us discuss all of the Punisher movies Brad made me watch.
Yeah, we did. And I turned you around on those.
I did. I liked one of them.
But we do recognize that not everyone can contribute to the Patreon, and we don't expect everyone to contribute to the Patreon. And if you just want to help us in any slight way, you can write us a review on Apple Podcasts because those reviews do help us reach a larger audience.
Yeah, it helps us chart.
Chart, not shart, Lisa. I've done none of that on this episode today.
We're not allowed to swear on Comic Book Couples Council.
Sharting is not a
You
swear.
can swear in a portmanteau. I am offended.
No,
Frankly,
you're
I'm
not.
offended, and so is our listeners.
Okay. Let's get out of the words of affirmation. Thank you, HTS_Jaws, for the lovely review. But we got to get into the comic book.
I cannot believe that shart is officially part of our words of affirmation.
No shart backsies, Lisa.
Oh.
But okay. Usagi Yojimbo said so. We're jumping into Miyamoto and Tomoe's future. Oh, hey, hold up. Kind of like Scrooge does in A Christmas Carol. Kind of like Batman Catwoman #1, Lisa. Senso is the perfect Ghosts of Christmas Future story. I'm so glad we're talking about this issue in December. Totally not planned, but it works so well.
Does it? I don't know.
I think it does.
I think you're stretching it.
I'm not stretching it. Senso is a mini-series that originally published in 6 issues by Dark Horse Comics from August 2014 to January of 2015. Here's the plot synopsis taken straight from the Dark Horse website. 20 years in his future, Miyamoto Usagi faces a menace from Mars. It will take all the considerable fortitude, ingenuity, and heroism that Usagi and his loved ones can muster to combat the fearsome extraterrestrial war machines and halt the alien invasion. In the end, not everyone will survive to tell the tale.
Actually, no one will survive to tell the tale because it ends technically hundreds of years in the future, right?
With Space Usagi, yeah. So everyone we're reading in this story is probably dead. Not probably dead, definitely dead.
Let's get into it.
All right, so first off, this book, Senso, the word meaning war, by the way, thanks for the asterisks, Stan Sakai. But we open on the final battle between the Gaishu clan, Lord Noriyuki's people, and Lord Hikichi, the great big bad of Usagi Yojimbo.
He's like the OTV. OOP. OT, one true villain.
Oh, okay. I was like, what are you talking about? But he's the guy who's responsible for the death of Lord Mifune, which then sent Usagi on his path down the Wanderer's Road. And as we've talked about on previous episodes, we've only seen his face once, and it was a human face. And because that tied into Nilsson Groundthumper's storyline and this whole different concept that Stan Sakai was working on, he's abandoned that since then. And so we haven't seen him since. And now we get to see him face to face here, but he's wearing like a war mask. So we don't actually know what kind of animal he is or if he is still human. He's very much a shadowy figure, even while he's occupying a panel.
We also get a couple of special guest stars in these opening pages. Lord Horikawa still like a right hand lord. Like, why is he
20 years later, we haven't gotten rid of this guy?
adult Noriyuki is still not caught on that he's trying to sabotage his every move.
But we also have adult Jotaro.
Very cool. We have Genosuke, who went from a bounty hunter to a general. Like, how did that happen?
Oh, well, and Usagi himself has joined the Gaishu clan. He's not wearing the Mifune crest anymore.
That's a big deal.
I mean, it's huge. I think it signals a major growth. And, that means he's settled down in the Gaishu province, something he never thought he was going to do.
Perhaps largely motivated to be closer to Tomoe.
Well, we're going to get to more Tomoe talk here in a second. We also get the introduction of Takanoko, who
I've never seen before.
Yeah, and I don't think we've ever seen him before this in Usagi Yojimbo. Now, his descendant does appear in Space Usagi, and he's like a Q-like character who gives that Miyamoto all his gadgets.
That totally makes sense, because here he is presenting Lord Noriyuki with this tank in the shape of a turtle.
I love it so much.
But do you know who does not love it? Lord Noriyuki.
Yeah, no.
And I think this plays to our theme of honor, because Noriyuki looks at this machine and he goes, well, this is an abomination, and it would be not honorable to use, even if it means finally defeating Lord Hikiji.
Yeah. And so he chooses not to send that into battle. And
at this point.
At this point.
With this foe.
Because guess what? Who drops in the last few pages of this first issue? The Martians, the big bullet.
Ooh, nice Foley work.
Thank you. But I guess actually it's Bakadoom.
Bakadoom!
It's this massive 2-page splash that Sakai illustrates. And I think this is where we go like, okay, Sakai is pulling out all the stops with his art. This is an astonishing spread. And like you see the devastation. It is quite the shock, even though you know it's coming. You know that this is a crossover with H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. This is still like, whoa. This is a whoa moment because we've been waiting for this battle the entire time we've been reading Usagi Yojimbo. And what does Sakai do? He interrupts it with a Martian invasion. That's a little anticlimactic.
Especially when it looks like the Gaishu clan was totally going to win.
Yeah, thanks to Jotaro.
Yes, Lord Noriyuki had just called in the last of his reserves, led by Jotaro and Motokazu, and Usagi being like the conflicted, proud papa is like, I can't even look, especially considering I still have not told you that I'm your dad.
Yeah. Maybe that's a little frustrating, but it tracks with who they are as characters.
Absolutely. We do see that there is one relationship that seems to have grown for Jotaro. His rapport with Genosuke.
Yes.
They clearly have some kind of battle history and a mutual respect and almost like a mentorship relationship.
Yeah, and Motokazu
really
as well. They're kind of like little samurai buddies now. And it's
Brothers,
so great.
bros.
Yeah, they're bros. Samurai bros. I'd read that comic. But it's great to see like Motokazu going into the role that his father truly wanted for him. Like he has ascended.
And he totally looks like his dad now.
He does,
It's so sweet.
I love it. Getting to the second issue, it opens with this really awesome page where the Gaishu soldiers are pulling themselves out of the pit where the egg has dropped, the shell has dropped. And that page actually is redrawn for the hardcover edition. When it was published in singles, it didn't quite look this way, but because Sakai is such a boss, Lisa, he's like, I can sell this devastation better. I'm going to redraw this entire page.
The texture is beautiful. It looks like a zombie wasteland.
Like that expression on the main soldier in the foreground is so broken. I love this page. And it's great. Like if you go to the back of the book, you can see there are several pages throughout this story that Sakai has redrawn. And that's something that he does throughout his tenure as Usagi Yojimbo's master. And again, like that's why you love this guy, because clearly he cares about it. He doesn't tinker George Lucas style. He doesn't keep doing it over and over again, but he gives it like a once-over pass.
He's obviously not like changing huge details of the storyline.
Yeah, he's not taking the Yub Nub Ewok song out of the book. He would never do that.
Yeah.
Keep Yub Nub forever. Okay.
Heavy shot first.
Heavy shot first.
I don't know.
So, like, okay. So what we do get in this issue is that Hikichi and Hebi and his troops, they approach the shell first.
their initial thought is, in my opinion, kind of smart. They go like, do you know who lives in the sky? The gods. This could be an emissary from the gods.
Yeah.
We want to get in there and make some alliances.
Yeah. And so they approach, and this plays out very much like H.G. Wells's book, where the main characters are observing the first attack from the Martians, where the heat ray comes out and obliterates Hikichi's men. And we see tentacles reach out, pick up Hikichi, and we think that Hikichi is being killed, although he's going to come back later in this series.
Hebi is stuck in my craw because he is the first character that I've seen in Usagi Yojimbo that doesn't stand up on two legs, and it's weird to me.
So an anamorph snake is like a bridge too far for Lisa Gullickson?
No, but we are approaching what you know for me is a bridge too far.
We'll get there. But the next scene is Chizu, the leader of the Nico Ninja clan. The Nico Ninja clan that used to serve Lord Hikichi, but now are hanging out with the Gaishu and are spying for the Gaishu. Chizu has gone down into the Martian pit and stumbles into some Martians chillaxing, and she eradicates them with her blade. She's an awesome ninja, and reports back and says, hey, guess what? They can be killed. I guess it's also worth mentioning that Chizu is another female character in Usagi Yojimbo that has had sort of these romantic dalliances with Usagi.
What? Is there a single female character that he has not flirted with?
Yes, there are. But like Kitsuine and Chizu and Tomoe, there's a few others.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I mean, he's on the Wanderer's Road for a long time.
Well, he's settled down now, and he only has eyes for Tomoe,
Yeah.
and those eyes are green because he's jealous, and we're going to get into that right now. So we cut to Usagi and Tomoe, and she's kind of admonishing him and lecturing him, going like,
Yeah.
it was irresponsible of you to just run in and save Jotaro. Like you, as a samurai, you need to keep a cool head. And, like that tendency to pop off is something that you guys share as father and son. And he shushes her and is like, hey, you're not supposed to speak openly about that. And Tomoe is like, you really should tell Jotaro at this point.
I think this is another moment where we got to just like give a high five to Stan Sakai's abilities as an artist, because that expression on Usagi's face is so severe. It is shocking, like to see how angry he gets in that moment about this topic.
The way that he talks to Tomoe has changed.
Yeah.
There's something in their relationship that is fundamentally different.
Yes, there is.
And has left Usagi really bitter and short-tempered with Tomoe, which makes me uncomfortable. So he goes on to explain like why he still hasn't told Jotaro. And he's like, well, at first I didn't want to undermine his relationship with the father who raised him, Kenichi, and now it's too late. And Tomoe goes like, it's never too late. And Usagi turns on her and is like, well, it's too late for you and me.
Yikes.
And at that moment, someone calls out for Tomoe, and it's Kubo-sama, who is her husband.
Not Lord Ito, who was the last husband.
Yeah, what happened to that dog otter guy?
I don't know.
But like we have this panel where there is like this tense acknowledgement between Kubo and Usagi. And so like her husband is fully aware that their relationship is something that's very close.
Yeah, but that dude won, and he turns his back on Usagi and walks away. Now, the next morning, we learned that while our friends were sleeping, the Martians were tinkering away, and they have built 2 massive tripods, and they're up and at 'em.
Seeing this, Lord Noriyuki turns to Takenoko-sensei and is like, you know what, get your turtle weapon thing. And Tomoe is like, but you said that was dishonorable. And Lord Noriyuki is like, but look at what they've built.
Yeah, you gotta fight fire with fire.
It reminds me of The Last Samurai and all of them going up against all of the modern weapons with their bows and arrows and swords.
Yeah, so what would Lori Tsugawa Whaley say about this when he doesn't choose to just fight with swords? He does go and get a cannon.
Tsugawa Whaley does harp on the point of like samurai do not compromise. They have well-defined principles, and to stay on the straight and narrow, they have to be choosing according to their principles every single time. Maybe exceptions can be made for fighting aliens from outer space, but I don't know.
I think Laura Tsugawa Whaley would say that this is not the honorable move, but this is Stan Sakai, a modern cartoonist, saying you got to fight fire with fire.
And you gotta fight enormous octopus-filled tripods with dishonorable turtle tanks. And they do. And they manage to fell one alien tripod, but they also destroy the tank in the process. But we do know that Takanoko has one other machine he's been tinkering with.
Oh man, that secret weapon. I can't wait to get to that point.
But a lot of people gotta die first.
Yeah, issue 3 is like the murder issue. And it's also the issue where, as I'm reading it, I sort of go like, you know what? I'm starting to reject the premise of this story. I know I shouldn't. Lisa says never reject the premise, but I'm starting to do it because we see Jason and Keiko wander into the village under attack by the tripod. He sees Usagi. He gets excited. He's like, this is it. I'm finally going to get to kill Usagi. And then a heat ray obliterates Jason. Like, Jay should not die in this moment. Jay is another massive villain, and to be tossed away so quickly at not even the midpoint of this comic gets me so mad.
What confuses me is why is he back in his old body? Because the last time we saw him, he was in a lady.
Okay, so technically that's not his old body. That is another dude. It's a new body.
It's a new body that looks suspiciously like his old body?
Correct.
I think Stan Sakai just likes drawing those shapes.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. I like seeing him in this shape, but it doesn't matter because he's dead. Lisa, when this happened, I know you're confused, like, why is he in the old shape? But, like, when this happened, you know, what was your gut reaction to it?
That it felt not like a final showdown, but like a cameo.
And doesn't that highlight, like, okay, this is definitely not canon. It can't possibly go this way in the main story.
Yeah, totally. Let's just do a bullet point of everybody who dies in this issue. So Jason's dead. Chizu dies.
Yeah, Chizu dies, goes out heroically. She plants a bomb on a tripod and explodes in the process.
Genosuke dies.
And again, you're like, oh my gosh, Genosuke. He does get some really badass moments. He takes care of a bunch of these octopi creatures, and he jumps into the pit. He goes face to face. He gets shot in the back by a heat ray, and he's gone.
In front of Jotaro's eyes. And I think
Jotaro has some great action moments in that pit, too. He's slicing and dicing.
He is literally killing it.
Yeah, he is.
But I think that seeing his mentor die has him thinking about his biological father, and he gets kind of a rehearsal for watching his father die.
Right. But like, so I love this issue and I love this series. It's a lot of fun. But I'm with you. I'm with Stan Sakai. This is just a fantasy. It's a what-if issue. It's a Marvel what-if issue.
And this particular issue ends with another egg falling.
When it does, it collapses a building atop Tomoe and Usagi, and it gives them an opportunity to, like, confront their mortality and confront their relationship. And this issue becomes the center of their romance. And in a lot of ways, it's the culmination of everything we've been talking about on this podcast for the last 4 episodes.
When they return to consciousness and begin to dig their way out, they realize that this might actually be the end for them. And Tomoe is kind of bittersweet about it because she goes like, well, we could die together. And Usagi is like, yeah, we could finally die in each other's arms. There's no better way to end our unrequited samurai romance.
Like, it's so, like, yeah, it's bittersweet. It's so tragic. It's so sad, but it is also, like, very loving. Like, as a Western reader, I get caught up in all kinds of complicated emotions over this scene.
It really underscores everything that Tomoe has given up to keep her honor and keep her loyalty to Lord Noriyuki. And so they start to have that, like, do you ever wonder what might have been conversation? And Tomoe says, like, Jotaro should have been our son.
Yeah.
Because
Brutal.
she has had, not only is she not living with, not in a marriage with Usagi, but she is childless.
Right.
And we've never, at least from what I've read, heard her talk about a desire to be a mother.
Right.
But that is, even for a person who's choosing to be childless, there is always that question in the back of your mind.
Sure.
Of what kind of parent, what kind of child would I bear, blah, blah, blah.
Some kind of jock.
Of course, Usagi is like not listening to her pain because he is carrying his own pain because he's like, yeah, he could have been our son, but you married Buichi.
Oh. He gets all mad again, just like a dude.
So like a dude. But Tomoe puts her feelings aside to take care of his fifis. And she's like, it was a political union. I don't love him. He doesn't love me. Nobody is having a great time in this marriage. And Usagi brings this to the logical conclusion they've come to every single time they've broached this topic, that Tomoe has a duty to honor Lord Noriyuki. She now has a duty to honor her wedding vows. And Tomoe goes like, yes, and I have honored them. So she's going like, now that we're in our dying moments, we can now honor what we want and we can honor our love by dying together.
Ha ha, not so fast.
Because as soon as Usagi looks like, okay, they're finally going to confess their love and perhaps bone underneath a broken building, they feel a breeze and there's movement in the rubble. And it is one of the octopuses. It's one of the aliens, and they start a fighting, and they actually enter the egg.
Yeah, and I love this sequence because we get to go see what's going on in these bullets, what's going on in these eggs. There's lots of these octopus creatures
that are physically inferior. They're super easy to kill, but they are in crazy numbers. There are so many of them.
And they are being overwhelmed, but thankfully Motokazu and Jotaro show up. They are able to free Usagi and Tomoe, and they escape. And then we get another really incredible sequence where, guess what? Lord Hikichi, not dead. He's alive. We see Hebi looking skyward towards these tripods, and he goes like, everything is destroyed. Surely this is the end of the world. And the tripod comes up to him, a door opens, and out comes Lord Hikichi. He is alive, but he is shadowed. We still don't get to see what his face looks like. And he is fully working with the Martians. And he's telling Hebi, look, this is what we got to do. If we want to survive, if we want to rule over this planet, like forget Japan, forget this tiny little nation that we're trying to rule here. We can rule this entire planet. Let's do it together. And Hebi's like, you are consorting with monsters. You're a demon. And you know what you do with demons, Lisa? When you're a snake man, you eat them. He eats Lord Hikichi. And that's a great moment. Like, I love this moment. I was like, okay, this is actually pretty great way for this character to go out.
And it shows that even villains have a code of honor. Like, clearly, Hebi feels that Hikichi has gone one dishonorable, self-serving fact too far.
And so it starts to rain, and Hebi is happy about it. He's like, it's starting to rain. Good. We need the rain. And he stares up defiantly at the tripod as he is obliterated by the heat ray. And this is a character that I've never liked in this series, but suddenly I'm like, good on you, Snake. And that takes us to the 5th chapter of Senso, where Tomoe's husband,
who
Buichi,
we've been calling Buichi and Kubo. Those are both his names. We are not sure of the order, and we're not checking our notes.
But he has gone in and to the forest, and he has found the Komori ninja, the bat ninja. And Lisa, here we are. These are the characters that are a bridge too far for you for some reason. Why don't you like the bat ninja people?
Because, okay, so we met one person who's slithering about. It makes me go like, well, like, where are the other slithering people? I've been only seeing, dipods. Yeah. And now like, okay, if there are bat people that are flying around, like, where are the bird people? How come there's not bug people? Like, I had already accepted, like, okay, like, all of Stan Sakai's characters are just, like, people. They just have funny heads. Now it's like, no, there is clearly, are there fish people? Like, what's happening?
Well, Lisa, look, you can't think about it too much. First off, you've only read now 4 trades of Usagi Yojimbo. There are all kinds of animals you have not encountered yet. But also, like, Lisa, this is not science. This is a fantasy world. Don't get hung up on it. And bat ninja are rad. They've got blades on their wings.
But, like, if they're bat ninja, like, how come they have the power of flight?
Yeah.
How come there isn't, like, at least one bat in every city we've been to? They're all staying in the same city.
You've only read 4 trades. There probably are some bats wandering around that aren't part of the ninja clan. Or they're just like a very tight family unit.
I want to see some receipts. I want to see the census of feudal Japan.
You just need to accept the fantasy of it.
What about teeny tiny bug people?
There probably are teeny tiny bug people.
I would read that comic.
Yeah, it's called Pixar's A Bug's Life.
Teeny tiny bug samurai. So cute.
Yes, but what's really important here, Lisa, is that they make an alliance. They do attack a walker. They take down a walker, but Tomoe's husband is killed in the process.
And his last words are, Tomoe, forgive me for denying you happiness.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very convenient emotional response.
He is literally saying it for our benefit so that we can kind of absolve Tomoe for harboring these feelings about Usagi, because now Buichi didn't, we have this kind of verbal confirmation that Buichi was kind of being a jerk marrying her in the first place.
Yeah, and like the second he's dead, Usagi is like pouncing on Tomoe in the garden.
Yeah, he does give condolences, and he's like, okay, now? And Tomoe's like, dude, too soon.
Yeah, too soon, Usagi.
And he's like, fine, but later maybe? And she's like, maybe.
And the issue ends with my favorite moment of the entire comic book series. It's such a geeky, gleeful sequence where we learn that the secret project that Takenoko has built is this massive Usagi Gundam.
Usagi should be so flattered because, like, to put myself in Usagi's shoes, he's like, you know what? I kind of thought that everything that happened around me was actually about me, even though I've been this, like, wandering Ronin, and now it's confirmed because Takenoko could have made that Gundam in literally any shape. It could be a Motokazu shape.
But Usagi has been with the Gaishu clan now for almost 20 years or somewhere around that time frame, and he's become a legend within the clan.
It could be a Lord Noriyuki shape.
He's not the ultimate warrior. We've now confirmed, because there's a Gundam, that Usagi is the ultimate warrior, and he needs the mech suit.
I am just saying that he should feel incredibly flattered.
Well, I'm just saying, I want this mech suit. Where's my toy? I need this action figure. Mondo, get on it. Make this for me. I want it to battle my Pacific Rim stuff.
Oh, and it would totally win. Though yeah. I like, you know how I feel about John Boyega.
This thing would murder John Boyega.
No.
Murder him.
No, because it's steam-powered.
With steam-powered ninja stars, murder him. Destroyed, decimated. Boyega, you're done. You're no match for the Usagi Gundam. Sorry, end of story. Moving on to the next topic, Lisa.
I mean, Usagi does die in that Gundam suit.
Okay, sure, fine.
John Boyega totally makes it.
All right, whatever. But like if John Boyega was in a steam-powered Pacific Rim Jaeger. Jägermeister? Is it a Jaeger?
I don't know.
Whatever, he's dead. I like Usagi better.
Okay, well, if that was what the argument was about, you win.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, sweetheart. The important thing is that Takenoko has finished it just in time because there's a 3-walker headed for Edo.
The final issue is a fight issue. It's Tripod versus the Usagi Gundam. It's awesome. It's a ton of fun. That's primarily what goes on.
Usagi had one thing to do. A very first task was to lure the Three Walker away from the castle.
Yeah, he does not do that.
But the way that the fight ends is them both taking considerable damage and collapsing onto the castle.
And Lisa, I know you're not like a big action person. Like when a comic sort of descends into just like action page after action page after action page, you sort of tune out. With something so crazy like this issue, with a Gundam versus a tripod, like, are you really appreciating it? Like, is this exciting? Is this different than other action sequences?
I did find it confusing, and I don't understand the outcome exactly, because they both, I guess, tie for last, but I guess because they both collapse and both die.
They tangle up in each other and they both collapse, but Usagi Gundam is on top of the tripod. So I see that as a victory for the Usagi Gundam.
He is literally on higher ground and therefore he wins.
Yeah, yes, just like, Anakin Skywalker knows the importance of higher ground.
I guess the whole point was they began to presume that these first couple of eggs were scouts. And the whole point was so that the alien scouts could not then return to their planet and bring more. So in that, our team won. Go humanity or animal-manity.
This book doesn't follow the finale of War of the Worlds where the common cold kills everything. I mean, maybe it does. We just don't see that. What's important here is that Usagi had his final moment of honor defending his people.
And what is the ultimate end to an act of honor but dying, like right after, before you can, do anything else? Like, did something super honorable, gotta die now. So Jotaro and Tomoe run towards the rubble and they pull Usagi out and he is battered and bruised. And right in that last moment, an octopus pops out and stabs him all of the way through, shocking Tomoe, but she still has her wits about her enough to kill that last octopus.
Yeah, and it's in these final moments of Usagi's where the father and son can finally confront each other as father and son and admit that they both knew already. And there is a tremendous loss there. Like, of course, they wish they could have said this before, and they should have said this before, but because of their sense of honor, neither of them was going to do that.
Usagi was certainly never going to do that because it came down to Jotaro being the one to call him father.
Yeah.
So, I feel like Usagi still shouldn't get any credit for finally admitting anything to Jotaro.
He was going to take it to the end. Like, he was never going to admit anything. But Jotaro is the one who slipped up and said father. And because of that slip up, they're actually able to now see each other as father and son.
And Usagi can finally hand over his swords to his descendants so that his legacy and this act of honor can be passed on through the upcoming generations.
And that's what we see in the final moments when it's revealed that this entire story has been a bedtime tale told by Space Usagi to these children.
Yeah, you did skip over another thing that Usagi never gets to do, which is to tell Tomoe those three little words. We literally get the cliche I love, and then he dies.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And it makes Usagi's entire journey tragic. That being said, because his story is being passed down, because his swords are being passed down, his descendants get to learn from his adventures and grow from the lessons that he learned over the course of his life and to make up for what went unsaid in his life.
But that's also a huge part of tragic hero tales or tales of honor is the other side of the coin of living as a legend is during your mortal life, you have to live this life of self-denial.
Yeah, and clearly self-denial is something that is romanticized and cherished within samurai fiction and in a lot of fiction.
But I want to bring back a point that you made at the beginning of this episode where in this story, in this hypothetical flight of fancy, Stan Sakai gets to bring these stories to their obvious conclusion. obviously Tomoe and Usagi's love is doomed to be unrequited. So now, perhaps in another storyline, we can have a more exciting, a more surprising ending for those two.
Well, I think what Senso ultimately is a chance for Stan Sakai to live out the final moments of Usagi in a way that he never actually will within the main title, because Usagi Yojimbo is going to be written until Stan Sakai is no longer with us. I don't think we'll ever see Usagi off the Wanderer's Road. I don't think he will ever find peace and harmony. He will be doing one adventure after another until the comic is no longer being published.
I like that idea of Stan Sakai going like, okay, this is the end of Usagi as he exists now in 2015. This is the logical extension if we keep going exactly
as is.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. What happens when Stan Sakai does inevitably crumble under the weight of mortality? Do you want to see him pass on his swords to the next generation? How would you feel about another writer, artist picking up Usagi Yojimbo?
I mean, it is interesting that Usagi Yojimbo is not Hellboy. Like, Mike Mignola has been fine with letting other artists take over the character and interpret it in different ways and play around with him. Stan Sakai has not done much of that. Like, Usagi has appeared in some Ninja Turtle comics, and I really think that's it. I love that because Stan Sakai's Usagi is Usagi to me. But I imagine what's going to happen is we will see other artists of the day do their interpretation. And I do look forward to that. I think about like what happened to Will Eisner's The Spirit after he passed away. You get guys like Darwin Cook to come in here and do a spin. Is Darwin Cook's The Spirit the Spirit? No, but I do like seeing Darwin Cook's The Spirit. So I would like to see other people tackle Usagi, but I want Stan Sakai to tell the story that he wants to tell.
I love that you have cursed Stan Sakai to never retire. He may not stop drawing that rabbit Ronin.
I don't think I've cursed him. I just think that's what it's going to be. Like, I just don't think he's the type of guy who does retire. Now, if he wants to Quentin Tarantino it and quit after a certain amount of stories, sure, fine, that's great. And if he wants to cultivate or curate the artists who would take over this character, I'm interested and curious to see that. I just don't think that's going to happen.
So Stan Sakai's relationship with Usagi Yojimbo will never end. But our little series on comic book couples counseling with Usagi and Tomoe is ending with Senso. So how do you feel about that, sweetheart?
Well, I'm sad to see Usagi and Tomoe leave this show. I think that this couple has been a lot of fun to cover. Similar to talking about Silver Surfer through the lens of Dan Slott and Michael Allred only, it's great to just drill down into one creator's point of view. And I've adored talking about these characters. And I've really liked ending this run with Senso, this imagined ending to the relationship of Tomoe and Usagi, because so often in our podcast series, we don't get that final goodbye or that final embrace. And Usagi Yojimbo in Senso does that with this what if. So I feel like this episode is about as satisfying a final episode in a 4-episode arc that we could give. We talked about this a little bit in our Patreon Batman Catwoman episode, but with Bruce and Selina, you don't get an ending. They're going to go on for another 80 years, unless you get an issue like Brave and the Bold 197 or whatever Tom King is doing in this future timeline in Batman Catwoman, right? You have to imagine the end for these characters because it's never going to come. But when you do that, you're also signifying to the reader that this is a what if. And so there's always a sense of, well, this ain't canon. It makes the story easier to dismiss, but that really doesn't matter at the end of the day. Like, did you enjoy the tale? Does this story track with what you know about these characters? And in this case, I think it does.
It satisfies the conversation that we always want to have on this podcast. What is the logical extension if we took these two characters as they are in this single volume or single issue or whatever we're tackling, like, what is the logical extension of their romance?
Yeah.
And we don't have to wonder with
here it is.
Usagi and Tomoe. Here it is. That's right.
And we were gifted that with Dawn and Norin in our Silver Surfer series. And I just have loved this last 6 months on Comic Book Couples Counseling. And I hope all our listeners have enjoyed it as well. But we're not quite done yet. We have to talk about what have we learned in tackling Miyamoto Usagi and Tomoe Ame through Senso. What are we pulling out of this book, applying to ourselves?
For me, the logical extension from watching Tomoe and Usagi throughout all of the volumes, concluding with Senso, is you shouldn't put your happiness on the back burner. You shouldn't leave things unsaid. Tell Jotaro, hey, I'm your dad and I want to father you. Tell Tomoe, like, screw being samurai. We want to be together. We should be together. But I don't think that that's what Lori Tsugawa Whaley would say.
No.
And I don't think that that is what Stan Sakai would say.
No.
I think that they would argue that Usagi and Tomoe were doing the exact right thing by honoring their principles, their personal Bushido codes, and honoring their commitments to their lords, Lord Noriyuki, or the memory of Lord Mifune.
Right.
And that's partly what I've already talked about, that idea of, like, to be a true selfless hero, there has to be this certain amount of self-denial.
Yeah.
I do think that any path in life involves prioritization. Like, I'm sure everybody on their deathbed has certain things where they go, like, I could have gone this direction. Like,
regret.
It's like that old, I don't even know what the origin of it is, but, like, you can have a family life, you can have an artistic life, you can have a career life. Pick two.
Yeah.
And I think that for Tomoe and Usagi, family life has been the thing that they've denied themselves.
Yeah, and I agree. I had the same takeaway. Like, I'm ready to come on here and go, like, don't let these moments pass you by. But that's very easy to say with the life experience and the culture that we have been raised in. That's different than what Usagi and Tomoe have gone through. So to put judgment on how they live their lives seems wrong, and I don't want to do that. And also, it's that self-denial, it's that honor that I love, that I romanticize, that I fetishize. Like, that's why I read Usagi Yojimbo.
But if I were to take what we've learned from Usagi Yojimbo and try to shape it into something that I think would help my approach to sorting out, like, what is the thing I should be going after? What is the thing that would be nice but could go on the back burner? I think we could benefit as a couple by really having an open and honest conversation about what are our actual priorities. I think that we hate to admit it some of the time, but we do prioritize our own happiness over success.
Sure, yeah, okay.
We don't push, career-wise, we don't push each other super hard.
We're both very content. We're content type of people.
If anything that's going to undermine our stardom, it's
contentment.
What a great time we're having.
Yeah, sure.
But that doesn't have to be a regret if we just say out loud, like, that's a conscious choice. Our number one priority is to be happy. And our measure of our success will be our measure of happiness, not our measure of, like, cash monies or followers on Twitter.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree with that. And that's going to bring our conversation on Usagi Yojimbo to a close.
Aw, our trip down the Wanderer's Road is over.
Bye, Miyamoto. Bye, Tomoe. It's been a blast. Yeah. So next week, it is time. It's December. It's the end of the year. 2020 is done. Thank God. But with the end of 2020 comes one of our favorite episodes. It's the best comic books of 2020.
Should old acquaintance be for... So if you guys have any ideas for categories we should cover, or maybe you have like, this is the definitive best volume of comics of 2020 or best issue or best whatever, be sure to tweet it at us. Though we do have, we're going to be doing some mad reading in the next couple of days.
We got a lot of reading to do. We got a lot of catch up. Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil, I'm determined to catch up to issue 25. I know that was a big deal. A lot of people have already tweeted us that that's the best single issue of 2020. I'm still leaning towards what Jonathan Hickman's been doing over on X-Men. I know we picked House of X as the best single issue last year, issue number 2. Moira, oh my God. And I feel like X-Men number 7 is the best single issue of this year, but maybe not.
Maybe not. Don't tip our hand.
Yeah, well, we got to do a lot of reading. So that's what we're doing. Next week, we're going to unleash the best of 2020. I'm super excited about it. And then we might return to Sex Criminals, because guess what? That relationship has wrapped up too with issue number 69, dudes.
69 dudes up top.
Up top.
But for the time being, it is time to return our microphone katanas to their scabbards.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you a question. Brad.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on all social medias at MouthDork. If you have words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art, send them to Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa.
Yes.
Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I am always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and iTunes. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit the website, www.comicbookcouplescounseling.com. That's 3 W's before the dot. www.comicbookcouplescounseling.com. That's how you say that, Lisa. Or you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at CBCC Podcast.
I like for when you say our website, you spell out the part that no one needs spelled out. You can give us the gift of 5 stars on iTunes. And if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show while you're there? We are fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, folks, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport open.
Doobie-doobie-doo-doo-doo. Thank you, HTS_Jaws, for the lovely review. But we got to get into the comic book with, yes.
I was going to interrupt you and say, I can't believe that Shart is officially part of our words of affirmation. Can I interrupt you and say that?
Yeah.